Hey everyone, welcome to the fourth ever Blast weekend show. This is where we break down everything that's going on in Blast in the last 7 days. Today I'm going to be joined by two of my favorite Twitter followers. We got BCheque and Icobeast to talk all things Blast capital allocation, what's going to be going on in the next 30 days leading into the Blast TGE, if it's going to be affected by the ETH ETF approval, all of those fun things. And we're also going to talk, obviously, all things Blast Gold allocation, how to maximize your upside. Speaking of, Pacmoon just hit a nice little jackpot. We'll talk about that a little bit, but that's a nice win for anyone involved. And speaking of, I'm going to be giving away $200 in Pacmoon to people on YouTube and on Twitter. So if you're listening on Twitter, just give me a like, retweet, and comment. I'll probably just go off retweets or comments. If you're listening on Twitter, just comment, be active in the chat, and I'll pick two winners at the end of the show. But to kick things off, we are having BCheque joining us. He is the founder and host of The Morning Market. This is a Twitter Space and YouTube show that goes live every weekday morning at 7 a.m. Eastern. It's a fantastic listen. Very, very insightful takes from rational people, which are hard to come by right now. But he's also the writer of The Snapshot. This is sent every single Friday. A great read as well. I believe they have 2,800, or he has 2,800 subscribers. Absolutely crushing it. You can follow him on Twitter at BCheque1. BCheque, welcome to the show, man. How you doing?
Thanks so much for having me, Clemente. Absolute pleasure to be here. Very, very excited to get into this conversation on Blast.
Big jackpot. We were just talking about it. So people that were just tuning in or are unaware, Pacmoon won the jackpot. I believe seen a little bit of a dip here and proper recovery, which we'll see. But BCheque, just to kick things off, what I want to talk to you about initially is I saw you tweet, and this kind of stuck with me, is you said that one of the biggest unlocks for me has been accepting that, at least in portion, I am a capital allocator now. And basically looking at how you distribute, how you invest as a job, right? As work, in terms of clearing things aside and looking at it as a professional versus being emotional about it, which is what I think a lot of people do, and myself included. Can you walk me through how that has translated into Blast in particular? Correct me if I'm wrong, but you bridged to Blast very early in November. I think you were the one that held that space with Eddie, like the day it was announced. And I just want to know, like, how you've looked at and thought about Blast as a capital allocator from back in November to fast forward to today, and how you're thinking about it with going into the TGE.
Okay, so one little bit of context in terms of that capital allocation point. I think it also relates to like my professional background. So I think a lot of the time when you come from what you'd say is like a traditionally successful background, where you like, I was a corporate lawyer before this, and you're like very much trained to think that the work that you do is like producing a report for someone, you know, doing your emails with your clients and like doing very specific, tangible things, like finish this spreadsheet and send it off and things like that. And there's never really been a time where like thinking, processing, analyzing, and then just making a decision has counted as like official work. And I think being a bit more forgiving with yourself to be like, no, do you know what? I need like an hour to clear everything out of the way. And I just need to think for a minute. And this is what I actually did when it came to allocating my ETH back in November, because I knew Blast was happening. And there were a few other big, actually, narratives on ETH at the time. So restaking is another big thing that I've been doing. So I basically, I in a spreadsheet, I put all of the ETH that I had in a number. And then I was like, okay, where are the places that I'm going to put this? So I'd put like a number against how much I wanted to go into Blast, a number how much I wanted to go into restaking, number and how much I wanted to exist in NFTs, number and how much I wanted to be in NFT lending, which I'm also very big on. Then I just played with the numbers, because like, okay, if you've got 20% here, 30% here, how much do I want completely liquid? And I was like, well, do I like the look of this? Do I not like the look of this? And then you just keep tweaking it until you like what it looks like. And then to take that further, when you think about it from the Blast perspective, you just do the same thing again. So say you put, I don't know, just an example, 10 ETH across into Blast. You're like, well, okay, well, where is all of my 10 ETH in Blast? Maybe I want to put 2 ETH into Wasabi. You want to put a few ETH into Munchables. You want to put a few ETH into something else. And the reason I say Munchables was because in terms of managing your risk, especially on a new protocol, you obviously don't want to put too much in any one thing. So I legitimately thought, I thought I had lost 12 ETH in Munchables at the time because that thing rugged and it looked really bad. But like that was part of the plan. Like it wasn't going to kill me. It didn't feel good. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
But it was part of the process of figuring out like how I'm going to allocate appropriately.
So what basically you're taking your approach on how you allocate capital in general across all blockchains, just stables versus going into Sol versus ETH. And then you're going, okay, within my ETH stack in general, now I'm within the Blast ecosystem as a whole. How am I going to allocate into different dApps, into farming versus other things? Okay. And fast forward to today, right? Obviously, we have Pacmoon, the clear winner, I would call, of Blast, considering congratulations to everyone that won the jackpot just now again.
For sure.
You have Fantasy.top, you have things like Wolf Game, there's Blast NFTs, which are basically kind of vaporware in a lot of cases, but there are also very interesting collections being built on there. How are you navigating how you allocate your capital amongst these things and trying to what are you optimizing for? Is it Blast Gold? Is it just keeping your ETH and earning that yield over time? Me personally, for example, one of the mistakes I made was allocating too much of my Blast ETH into Fantasy.top, and I got burned when ETH ripped and I missed out on that upside. So there's ups and downs and pros and cons to each one, but I'm curious how you're thinking about that.
Look, this is a really, really important question, because the interesting thing you'll note when you see on the timeline when everyone says how much gold they're getting, no one's ever telling you how much it cost them.
Yeah.
Like this is one of the most important points that people need to consider. And I wrote this tweet the other day, just when I was reflecting about this, and it relates to my philosophy almost and how I'm allocating this capital. I said, if you make 10K of an airdrop, that is not free money. Right. Unless you literally parked it somewhere and did nothing, people will inevitably share Blast airdrops of huge numbers relatively soon, but you have to ask how much time and ETH was sunk into that airdrop. Number one, time spent clicking buttons. Number two, time spent strategizing which buttons to click. Number three, time spent considering how much clicking button is worth. Number four, that as you said, ETH spent as a consequence of the clicking of buttons. And when you frame it as a job, it quickly becomes apparent that it's not as great value as you think necessarily, unless you can farm in huge size and do nothing and don't get rugged. And I think what happens sometimes is people aren't being open necessarily about how much time this is taking them, and maybe not valuing their time as much. So as it relates to my strategy, because I'm busy, as a content creator full-time, you do this every single day. This stuff takes a lot. Write the snapshot every morning, run the show every morning, run the second show with Thread Guy every evening. I'm optimizing for getting the most gold as possible whilst protecting my stack and my time as much as possible. So I'm very much looking for options which are like the most efficient. I'm not going to be playing all the games, for example, because that's not it's not time efficient. Even if the gold reward is high, if the time cost is high too, I find that quite challenging. So, that's my kind of perspective.
One of the things that I think you are, what I like about this Saturday stream that we've been doing is bringing on people with different perspectives, different things that they do well versus not well, but different profiles, risk profiles, time, etc. And you, in general, are someone that's very self-aware, I think, in what you're looking for and in the opportunity costs of certain things versus just following like all the trends that's going on. I think you're someone that is looking to optimize more for time, given that you for you in general, right? Time is actually a very important restriction, right? Because time that you're putting farming something for $6 gold, right, and you're getting 100 gold or whatever it is, that's going to take away from something that you inevitably could be building with your business, right, with the modern
100%.
market. And so that's something to keep in mind for people listening. When you listen to people like BCheque, he is also thinking about it from a Web3 entrepreneur where it's not just upside of your capital, but it's upside of like your business in general, because as a creator, there's that part of it as well.
For sure. And I just want to give you guys a shout out on this, because one of the things I noticed quite early on, and this is like from the beginning, frankly, the way Nick and Pio design this stuff, like there's some sacrifice in what they do. Like one of the reasons this space is so challenging is because there's so many opportunities all the time, and it's so easy to get distracted all the time by the next shiny thing and wanting to chase that. But I think that Nick and Pio in particular have been excellent at just withstanding against that potential distraction. They're not chasing the next shiny new thing. Yes, they might do it as a little bit of a joke as part of the stream and buy some crazy thing on the timeline at that particular moment. But like in general, like laser focus on the business. And, you know, in the grand scheme of things, say you get an extra 10 grand from Blast Gold, for example, for me. So, well, okay, what if I'd spent that time earning bringing in a client for 10 grand, and then that might be recurring because it's a multi-month deal, right? So I'm always thinking about it from that perspective. And frankly, I'd encourage other people to be thinking about that opportunity cost as well, because of the point I made earlier, which is when the people hit the timeline at the end of June and say, this is how much gold I earned, this is how many dollars I got as an airdrop, it definitely was not free. So you got to think of what was given up for that. And look, it still might be a great deal. It still might be worth it for some people, but there's always that tension, and you got to figure out what the right balance for you.
There's always something that you're giving up. And that goes back to what you were saying, I think earlier, that's important, is this like self-awareness period of going in and like writing stuff out of like, hey, what is it that you actually want to build? What do you want to accomplish? What are your goals financially, career-wise? Do you want to break into Web3 full-time? Do you want to make 6 figures? Do you want to build your portfolio from 10K to 200K? And like all of that stuff is so important in this game that we're playing, but so little people actually take the time to do it. Even myself, like I had so much from the business side, I was so like plugged into that and putting in so many hours that I've never really had the time to actually like think about and set aside time to like build theses and like do all of this stuff. But ever since I've been doing it, am I wrong often? Yes. But like it actually is, you can sit in things a little bit more comfortably knowing that like this is at least your decision versus you doing it because someone else was talking about it, right? Like
Sure.
it's so the worst is when I buy something and it ends up not doing well, but I bought it because of someone else's thesis and not my own, because then I start putting the blame on the other person. And then I'm like, oh, is that person's fault for like shilling it to me? I'm like, dude, like, what are you talking about? But anyways, I don't know if you have anything to say on that.
Yeah, for sure. I'll maybe just share like one other type of thinking that I found really helpful as part of this investment journey. Like at the start of this year was actually the first time I've ever done like these angel round style things, crypto angel investing. And I've never done that before. So I didn't really know what I was doing as such, but I put in a relatively reasonable amount of work into like in terms of research and all that type of stuff. But one of the things that really helped me was taking the time out and ascribing like a percentage probability of different scenarios happening. And you talked about how once you put in the thinking, you feel far more confident in sitting in a position. And I think it was for Portal actually, before I did that, I was like, I think this is a good deal, but what is it? So I was like, okay, well, what can actually happen in this trade? I can buy in at this valuation and it could trade higher later. I could buy in and it could trade the same. I could buy in and it could trade lower. And the final option is I could buy in and they just rug and they disappear. And it's like, well, what percentage chance do I think, based on this valuation that I'm seeing in front of me right now, what percentage chance is there that any of those things happen? And for me, it was something like 80 to 90% chance that this is going to trade either the same or higher based on the evaluation I saw. And it's like, well, okay, that's an easy bet then. Like I'm happy to bet once I've run those numbers, and appreciate, look, that requires a little bit of my judgment. You're not going to be right every single time, but at least that by going through that process, I felt very, very comfortable waiting for that TGE and seeing that play out.
Yeah. Yeah, and kind of on a similar note in terms of TGEs, we have the Blast TGE was delayed to June 26th. It was delayed 30 days or so. I don't know if this was planned or if Pac-Man got lucky, but we also see the ETH ETF approval happen, which is still up in the air of whether or not when this thing goes live and if there's going to be an appeal or all that stuff. But we have seen a 20% run on ETH in the last 7 days. You've been actually more pro ETH, more bullish on ETH, I think, and comparative to others. We obviously saw this Solana kind of narrative take off in the last 5 or 6 months, but you've also been you've always been more of an ETH bull, right? And you recently tweeted that you find ETH very useful. That's why you own a lot of it. There's more that you can do with it. Yes, there's other types of value. Other things may go up faster, but I really like how useful ETH is. And with that, like for example, actually, this is the most ETH exposure I've ever had because I'm on Blast and I'm trying to do all these things. But on this note, talking Blast TG, I'm curious how you're thinking about your capital allocation going into it, if you're going to sell afterwards, how you're navigating this ecosystem. The last thing I'll add here with some context is I found the Substack that Kobe dropped was very interesting, and I know you referenced it. It was talking about the low float, high FDV of a lot of tokens that we see right now, like Stark Network, Celestia, Dimension. They have a high or relatively low market cap, but super high FDV, and basically talked about how the VCs are taking a lot of the upside when these things go into the market. And a lot of retail is actually caught being this exit liquidity where if you bought Solana post launch or whenever they did that, VCs were only capturing like a 10% or a 10x upside or whatever. But anyways, on that note, we saw Friendtech do 100% token distribution, did pretty well. It's at last time I checked, it was like 130 mil or whatever it was. Both are paradigm backed. I'm curious on that note, how you're thinking about Pac-Man's launch, how much of it's going to be distributed right away, FDV, initial market cap, circulating, etc.
So to your first point, yeah, I think ETH is the best. Like I really like ETH a lot, but I don't overcomplicate things. Like I read so much stuff on the timeline, like really overcomplicating things, putting things in competition with each other all the time. And I think the reason why that happens is because people want to know which asset is going up fastest right now. And that's not really the way I'm looking at it. I'm just like, which asset do I need and which asset do I find very helpful? And I said this the other day, like I can't guarantee this, but you know how Solana has gone up so quickly recently and everyone thinks therefore Solana is the best asset. But with ETH, you can do so many more things. And so you can earn additional stuff on ETH in different ways. So that price appreciation might not be reflected in the token itself, but you might earn a lot of money from holding ETH because you used it to do something, but then the token itself hasn't gone up yet. So it kind of masks all of this money that you can make on ETH because it's so useful. Because the token itself hasn't gone up, people think, well, it's a bad token. It's like, no, but hang on, I just restaked a bunch and made like a 5-figure airdrop. You don't see that in the price of ETH itself, but that was what happened. So I think that's something that people miss.
Can you give an example of something that happened there?
Yeah, so there's multiple. So for Eigenlayer, for example, Eigenlayer is a restaking protocol on ETH. It's a very big deal. People are talking about it as like one of the main things that's pushing Ethereum forward at the moment. And there's all these different protocols which you deposit your ETH into, and then they deposit into Eigenlayer kind of on your behalf. So you're actually double dipping. You're putting your ETH with them. They drop a token, and then you're also getting the Eigenlayer exposure. So for EtherFi, which is the biggest one, and they've got billions of dollars locked up with them, I think it was like a 20, 30, it was actually more than that, like something like that, 30K airdrop from the amount that I put in. But that doesn't get reflected in the ETH price, right? And people don't think, oh, ETH is so good because the price has gone up, even though it's enabled me to deposit into there and get that exposure, and Eigenlayer exposure is still to come. So I think this is the type of thing where there's a lot of value in ETH that gets masked because you're doing things with it, but the price hasn't necessarily gone up, and therefore people are blind to it.
So on that note, an example of that actually that I'm thinking through right now is Easy on as part of the Bodago's crew used Solana a lot last year when the price was doing nothing. It was at $20. It was sub $20 for so long. But during that time, Easy was using it to farm Jupe, to farm Celestia, to farm all these different things that then came in, and we saw those airdrops happen 6 months later, and he got like 6 figures in airdrops. But you didn't see that when the price was not going up, right? Like it was just Solana was doing all these things, but he was using it to receive all of these airdrops. It maybe sounds like that's kind of what you're saying might happen in the next few months for ETH.
Exactly. But I think so. I think about these different blockchains as cities. So I think Solana is obviously like this great new, relatively newer blockchain. It's doing great things. There will definitely be examples of that, but you simply can't discount the number of man hours that have gone into Ethereum. Like it's just a more developed ecosystem, and there are more complex things that you can do in DeFi and other things on ETH. Even like the NFT lending market, for example, on ETH. Think how developed that is relative to the other markets, because there's more assets that are worth more on ETH, even though it's not like a perfect market at the moment. There's still more, so there's more to be able to do. So yeah, there'll be these opportunities on other chains too, but ETH is relative to those things just slightly more developed, and the other ones will still be great and still improve as the development increases. But ETH is ahead in terms of its development. That would be my point.
Yeah. And so anyways, on the TGE side of things,
the Blast stuff.
Going into that, how are you thinking about it?
I'm bullish. I mean, I bridged a lot over back in November for Blast. I'm bullish on Pacman, number one. Like, I think he's a killer operator. So like just from that perspective, I think he's great. In terms of the fact that the ETH ETF is kind of, all those positive moves have happened very recently at the same time, I think that is also very good. But again, it's not one of these things I overthink. Like things are going very, very well. The chain, I think, is in a great position. One of the things, the criticisms of Blast that I've seen, which I just want to kind of almost cancel out in some way, is that there's no culture and that it's all Ponzi-nomics. These are the two things that people say as a reason why it shouldn't be as valuable as people think that they are. To the first point, it's one of the most innovative L2s that exists. It has something that no other L2 has. The native yield element is entirely unique, and no one else has that at all. And it's created a huge step change in how people are able to create economic value. Like you've seen these artists do mints where you can have a refundable mint and earn on the interest. Like that just wasn't possible before. That's like a legit innovation that's purely done by Blast, and is also an innovation from the whole chain itself. The fact that everyone's earning all the time with this native yield. And in terms of the culture, like, okay, fine, there's a lot of people farming things, but they've got all the creators in Web3 absolutely obsessed with Blast Gold at the moment. Like, I don't see anyone doing that for Optimism and Arbitrum and ZK Sync. And not saying those chains aren't good either, because I know lots of them do good stuff too, and also have good incentive programs for different people. But like, it's taken over the timeline. So even from the attention perspective, both from the attention perspective and the technical perspective, I think they're doing really, really good stuff. So I think all the tailwinds are there for like a very, very healthy launch when this comes out.
My concern is I agree with you on all those points. Obviously, I'm very plugged into Blast, and I think what they're doing is exciting. My one concern is just the lack of participants that there are right now. There's only so much money, so much capital, so much attention to go around. Is my fear is that we're in still such a PvP environment, despite Bitcoin hitting new all-time highs. It feels like a lot of the liquidity that has caused this is because of the ETF, is like this institutional liquidity that's not really getting involved on like it's just at the surface, right? We're not, all these other layers are still, like, retail is not here yet, right? Is my only fear, right? So when you look at a TGE, when you look at like new liquidity coming in here, where is it going to come from is my fear. And I'm curious if you have anything based off of that.
Look, I think it's a good question. And you mentioned the Kobe article earlier, and he's been writing a little bit on low float, high FDV coins, which for the people who might be less familiar, that's when you come out at a particular market cap because your circulating supply is really, really low. Like the circulating supply is only 10% or something, or maybe even less of the total potential circulating supply. And so you have this kind of very inflated FDV because it's come out because there aren't as many coins on the market as possible. So I think people need to get creative in to try to lock coins up. And I think it's naive to think that Pacman will not have thought of something in this instance. It's like he's still got people staking the Blur token right now. Like people are staking Blur token right now because they're whatever. I don't even know what they were waiting for. It's something redacted. Maybe it's some blast exposure, but I'm staking some Blur token. And I think when this first season is over, there will be something to try to lock up our blast tokens in some way. Now, you never know those things for sure, but I think that will be how it plays out.
On that note, on the Blur side of things, I'm actually kind of curious what you make of this Blur token. I have a bag of it.
Nice.
I was disappointed by the lack of price action that we saw going into the. So here's my thought process, really quick on the Blur token. We saw a bottom of like 15 cents or so a month before the end of season 2. Right.
Yep.
Everyone was dunking on Blur. And then we literally saw it do a 3x leading into the end of season 2 plus the Blast TGE. What I was expecting was leading into the end of season 3 that we'd see this same price action from the, I don't know if it's the insiders or whatever it was. This is the first time I've seen actually positive price action on Blur. It's up 26% in the last 7 days. How much of that is because of the ETH pump? I don't know, but we're reaching this place where we know the end of season 3 is going to happen in a month. So this is certainly worth monitoring as far as this Blur token, but I'm curious how you're kind of navigating this, or if you have any thoughts on the Blur season 3, if we'll see a change of incentives, especially on the ETH NFT front, given how broken it's been in the past.
My best learning on this, we had Zeneca on the show last week, our morning show, The Modern Market, and he said this thing about everything related to Blur and Blast, which stuck with me, which was people talk about PvP. I think everything on Blast and Blur is PvP VP. So it's player versus Pacman. So like you just can't know what those things are gonna, like the incentive. To your question where you said like will incentive change, like yeah, there's gonna be some mechanic change. There could be something completely unexpected out of left field. We just don't know. So I try to minimize the amount that I have to try to guess what they're going to do, because I feel like it's just not possible for me to guess that. So I try to take that off the table. So the way that I thought about my Blur allocation, for example, was that I think I just bought like an ETH at the time because I got given an ETH airdrop from the previous round.
Yeah,
and I was like, look, I'm just buying an ETH here. I don't care if it goes up or down. Like I'm not monitoring that ETH as such. This is like part of the game. I'm putting it in as part of the game, but I'm not even going to try and be like, I need that ETH back. Hopefully that acts as some type of multiplier for something else somewhere down the line. But when it comes to that PvPv Pacman element, I'm going to let him do his thing. And for that, because that was a relatively smaller proportion of the bag, like I'm trying to not stress about it.
Got it. And within the Blast TGE or the next month or so, are you thinking of, well, I'm assuming you're up at least a 2x on that ETH that you bridged back in November. I mean, it has to be a 2.5x. Are you thinking of taking profits going into like the Blast TGE? I know you have some Pacmoon, you have some other assets on Blast. Like how much of, I don't know too much about your trading strategy, but I'm curious how you are thinking about it. Like, are you going to just sell all your Blast right away, or inevitably there's going to be another Blast, a season 2 of gold or all this stuff? There's no way Pacman's not going to do something like that. He might even do like an L2 loyalty score, right? Where it's like, hey, don't use optimism. Don't use like.
I heard that idea the other day and I thought, damn, that's a good one. He's probably going to do that.
He's going to run back the playbook that he used for Blur to literally he ate OpenSea's lunch in 6 months.
Just steal everyone's TBL.
So my thought process, dude, I'm so bullish. Like Pacman's a freaking animal. This guy is ruthless. He's going to keep dominating this, but I'm afraid of being stuck holding the bag in the like 30 to 60 days post Blast TGE of everyone taking profits and there's not new buyers.
Yeah, look, one of the key things for me here is just thinking about certain previous examples, but and it also depends on like where you are as a trader. And someone said this the other day on a show. I can't remember who it was, but like everyone always asks when they should buy. No one ever asks when they should sell. And if I think back to my 2021 trading, so you asked about my trading history, like I actually did well out of 2021. And it wasn't because I bought certain things, although that was part of the process because everyone was buying everything. I just pressed the sell button. Like if you're looking at a number and it's a high number for you as an individual, press the sell button because that is what actually makes you the money. And lots of these things will go up and down, and then you'll completely round trip it. So I think it's a personal perspective depending on where you are. If you're looking at the number and it's high, you're going to have to take responsibility to press the sell button. So I think that's a really important perspective.
That's a great take. That's a great take. And I've been reflecting a little bit on that. The selling is actually harder than the buying.
Yeah, it's easy to buy.
It's easy to buy. It's easier to come in. You look, the DCAing, it might hurt. You're going to feel yucky doing it. But like the times that I've taken profits on like Fantasy.top, like even recently when I sold like my Zeneca rare or my Kaleo rare for like 1 ETH, I was like, oh God, like, oh yeah, I'll sell it. And now like, and those turn out to be the best buys or the best sells. Exactly. Nub, just to give an example, this meme coin, and this is a new thing for me. I'm not used to being like in the profit. I'm like, hey, it's time to take profits. So I'm learning. But when I took profits on like Nub at like 80 mil, there's a Solana meme coin, the amount of comments from people that are like, oh, you dumbass, you really did it this time. We're going to 500 mil. It's down 70% since then.
Block it out, man.
So that's the hardest part. So I'm curious, like how you're, because we actually have to wrap. I'm going to bring on Icobeast in just a second. But before we wrap, like how do you decide when you personally decide to sell something? Is it when there's better opportunities to go? Is it when you hit like long-term capital gains? Is it, I don't know. Like, I'm curious just for you in particular, how you're thinking about this blast thing, because it's so interesting thinking about the strategy. I'm also think in general, the participants on Blast are just low because there's low participants in general. Long term, I think it could be an interesting way to bring retail in when you have the 5% yield baked in. And if you can really bait the builders in, that's the most important part. Yeah, before we wrap, I don't know if you have any closing thoughts on the Blast TGE, on kind of how you're thinking about it. Anything else you feel would be valuable to share?
Maybe two key things for me. One specifically related to some other things I've been in recently, which is like Dimension and Celestia.
Yep.
Where everyone was in those thinking, oh, if I stake these, I'm going to get like 100 million other things coming down in the future. Now, maybe those things are coming, but those coins have completely round tripped. And I did sell a certain amount. I think I'm up still, but although I'm not 100% sure, but I got caught in it. I got caught in that hype. I got caught in that like momentum of this is going to change everything. And if you stake it, you're going to get X, Y, Z. So one of my key conclusions is it is, I can't say never, but it is unlikely you're going to catch me staking again. Like you're not going to catch me staking again, because the things that I want, and this is how I've been taking all of my profits from angel investing and other stuff as well. I want Bitcoin, I want ETH, and I want Solana. Like, look, there will be other things that go up faster than those, but I don't care. Like I will earn the other things, and then I will take a proportion into USDC depending on my personal proportions, and the rest will go into either ETH and Bitcoin or Solana, just depending on the day, depending what the allocation is looking like. So you just won't catch me staking, man. When this TGE comes and there's going to be some type of Ponzi-nomics to
it's going to be juicy. It's going to be juicy.
It's going to be juicy, and they're going to want to entice you. They're going to want to entice you in. Look, maybe I'll sell half and do a bit. Maybe I'll sell 3/4 and do a bit. But there's no way I'm like rolling it all into the next one to try to 3x it or 5x it. Or I mean, what number multiplier are we on now? 14x on the multipliers. They're going to be some wild numbers involved potentially. So yeah, you're not catching me there.
I love it. I love it. Well, BCheque, thanks so much for coming on, man. It was an absolute pleasure having you on. Time flew by. You shared some great insights. Make sure to follow BCheque at BCheque1 on X, on Twitter. Follow the Modern Market at Modern Market _ You can also subscribe to their YouTube and also subscribe to BCheque's newsletter at the snapshot.substack.com. BCheque, thanks so much for coming on, man. Appreciate you.
Appreciate it, Clemente. Take care, man. Great show.
Yeah. Bye. All right. That is halfway through this gig, everyone. I hope you're enjoying this. A quick reminder that you can enter to win some Pacmoon. We're giving away $200 in Pacmoon like we always do. All you have to do is, if you're on YouTube, just like and hit us with a comment. I'll pick someone at the end of the show. Same on Twitter. Just hit us with a retweet and a comment, and I'll pick someone then. But next guest that we have is Icobeast. Is a little bit of a favorite of the listeners of the show. When he came on, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, but he's been actually coming out of the trenches a little bit and talking a little bit more about his blast strategy. He's sharing what he watches for every single day. This is Icobeast, and he notably has turned 5 ETH into 20 ETH. That is a 4x, everyone, and has accumulated 11,000 blast gold in the last couple of months. Last time he was on the show, he made some banger predictions about Pacmoon, about Fantasy.top, and other things that have come true. But Icobeast, welcome to the show, man. It's good to have you on.
Hey, thanks for having me back. I've been looking forward to this.
Congrats on the jackpot. Little Pacmoon jackpot just hit. For people not listening, or for people not aware, we saw an 19% jackpot is 411,000 gold distributed to Pacmoon holders.
You'll love to see it. It seemed like it was time. I think I was seeing a Mooncat post earlier. Been 10 consecutive jackpots with no Pacmoon. I'm looking at the chart right now, and it's just kind of goofy. The sellers, it's like it's hit 3 times, and people are like, "Oh shit, I guess I got to sell all of my Pacmoon now because it hit the jackpot." It's like, you dummies. They're putting out V2 next week, and on top of that, it's gonna hit again. This is the culture coin of Blast. It's super. I mean, nobody else hit 3x. It's often ERC20s instead of NFTs. And Pacmoon is always what everybody's talking about. Like, why are you selling your airdrop before their gigantic news drop next week? This thing's going to $1 billion.
Billion is that's what you've been calling for, is Pacmoon, Pacmoon to $1. We'll see how it plays out. Before actually, so Icobeast, I have multiple things I want to get into this with you. I think in the last couple of weeks, we've seen the up and down of Fantasy.top. We've seen Blast Jackpot kind of take over Twitter in a way where I think almost now it's overcooked a little bit. Like, I think a lot of the buyers going into a lot of NFT collections or meme coins, where if the jackpot wasn't there, I almost feel like they wouldn't own it at all. So it almost feels counterintuitive sometimes, where I'm trying to buy something and I'm like, hey, I'm just trying to buy it for the asset. I don't even care about the jackpot, but I know that if I buy this, the jackpot actually might make it a negative EV play because of the dump that's going to happen afterwards.
Yeah, so I think that's where Wasabi is actually a really, really awesome tool to use to hedge your positions. I've been doing that, probably not as effectively as I could be, just because I'm not that good at trading, and I'm not that good at like more complex financial structures. But if you have spot assets of something in pretty substantial size, it doesn't hurt. I mean, it's not the funding rates aren't that bad on Wasabi. So you can take out a comparable position short against whatever spot assets you have if you're expecting it to hit a jackpot, and then just ride it down. So you minimize your danger exposure. I would not be shorting wool if I were you, but that is one of those. I tried to long it actually about 15% below where it is right now last night, as soon as Cave Game opened, and it was already capped on liquidity. So I couldn't open that position. But shorting with a comparable size on spot assets you're holding for jackpot exposure, I don't think is a bad play, because so far, every single time a jackpot hits, people rush to dump that asset, either not understanding how the system works or thinking they can guess what the next thing is better. I'm not really a buyer here of various meme coins outside of Pacmoon, mostly because my theory on most meme coins in general is on a long enough time period, they're all going to zero. That doesn't mean that I'm going to catch all the right plays. Some of them are going to go parabolic. I mean, you see Mog and Pepe on mainnet just go nuts, and you've got some really fun coins on Solana that do that. But fundamentally, unless they've got something there in addition to culture, there's probably better assets, at least less risky. And I'm in a position where I don't need to take just the most extreme risks in order to even have a shot at compounding my capital. I've stacked consistent, straightforward wins on Blast for the last 3 months, and it's worked out pretty well. So Pacmoon's kind of thing I'm holding. bWOOL is definitely one that I'm stacking as well, just because I think I saw we burned over 1 million wool in the last 12 hours since Cave Game went live. It may be even more than that now.
Let's talk about that first. For people unfamiliar, Cave or Wolf Game announced, I think it was a few weeks ago, that they were bridging to Blast. They're an OG, like 2021 collection. They've been around for quite some time. I believe now they were acquired or part of Pixel Vault now, but their Cave Game went live yesterday. Can you give just a super quick high level rundown, ICO, of what Wolf Game is and how wool plays into it and kind of your bull case for it?
Yeah, so Wolf Game originally, like you said, 2021 OG NFT collection. We saw some insane trading go on with Wolf Game back in the day. Some guys traded up a couple of pieces of land to a CryptoPunk at its heyday, which was just a remarkable story. But they kind of went dark for a while. The game stayed live. I saw something on Twitter like, "Oh, didn't Wolf Game rug?" It's like, no, they didn't rug. Like, we use that term a lot here. They didn't rug. There was a lot of like internal strife with Wolf Game, and they had some issues for sure. You can check the chart, but everything from 2021 is pretty much down only since then, and kind of being reborn as we go. But Wolf Game is a little different than Cave Game. I don't know if they're restarting Wolf Game on Blast at some point, but Cave Game was kind of a sub game, mini game, dungeon crawler that was on mainnet, but they brought it over to Blast. And basically, you've got your little sheep that everybody got for free. It was a soul-bound NFT, a gold sheep. And you start off, you open up whatever boxes you got and were eligible for, and then you start going and exploring this cave. And it's a dark cave. You can only see a couple of squares around you at a time. You can buy power-ups to help you see better, to help you dig better, to get you more energy. And you go and find these little shiny spots, little shiny patches on the ground. And when you find those, you dig, and it does this goofy little gif of your sheep digging, and then you get stuff. So most of the time you're wanting to get gems, which we don't really know what those do yet. In the past, those were highly desirable and valuable because they let you generate new sheep and wolves, and were worth a lot of ETH. Here, I expect they have something to do with Blast Gold, which, again, we don't know what kind of gold allocation the Cave Game team, Wolf Game team has gotten, but it would be hard for me to believe that they actually got this whole bridging done without some guarantees from the Blast team. So I expect them to have sizable distributions for waves 4 and 5. But so you go and you run around in the cave and you try to find these shiny patches and dig for Blast points and gems. The music's awesome. You buy stuff in the store mid-game with the wool, and so that effectively gets burned. So you can buy pickaxes to go through walls. You can buy I guess like a metal detector so you can see where stuff is better. You can get goggles so you can see where other players have been. Because what happens, they dump about 400 of you in the same cave, and you're all trying to find the shiny spots in the cave first.
And do I find it by, like, I'm just walking around, it takes me 15 seconds to walk?
Yeah, okay, so it's super laggy right now because everybody's playing.
Got it.
So think about back when OpenSea in 2021, when it would go down because there's so much demand, or 4 or 5 months ago when Pallet, the C NFT exchange, would go down because everybody wanted to use it. That's what Wolf Game, Cave Game right now is experiencing, is everybody wants to play. So it's super laggy. Last night it was crystal clear, super smooth because everybody was asleep. So I enjoyed playing my daily rotation last night from like 1:40 a.m. to 3 a.m. My wife didn't care for it, but I had a great time. So that's what's going on. So it's going to be a little bit painful. I think they're trying to bulk up the servers to be able to support the heavy load. But yeah, once you're there at that screen, you want to go either up, down, left, or right as far as you can. You'll start to see where the cave actually opens, because right now you're not burning any energy walking around in this lit area.
Okay.
But once you get to the edge, it'll look dark, and you'll take a step out into the darkness, and that's every single step you take in the dark part of the cave burns one of your energy, and it takes 24 hours for that 100 energy to come back. And so it's like prorated over that time. So if you come back 3 hours later, you'll have some of your energy back. And so that's how it works. And so it's really a race to find as much shiny stuff as you can, because you want to get these Blast Gold points. I'm assuming there's going to be some kind of leaderboard, and that's going to be how they distribute gold. We don't really know. But yeah,
they don't have any gold yet, right? You're assuming that they're going to get a sizable Blast Gold jackpot from Pacman.
Well, yeah. So I don't know if it'll be a jackpot. I think bWOOL will probably hit a jackpot.
Sorry, from the gold distribution. There's two.
But yeah, so waves 4 and 5, similar to how we saw Fantasy get just a gigantic bumper crop of gold as soon as they started. I expect wave 4, Cave Game's probably going to get a pretty large chunk of it. Yeah, so right now you just stepped into the darkness. In a second, it should populate the rest of the dark part of the cave. There we go. So you don't want to go into that wall. If you do, you'll get stunned for 30 minutes and you'll burn 20 of your energy. And so that's what you do. You go through this giant labyrinth cave and you try to find all the shiny stuff. It looks like it's probably not a great experience right now just because of how laggy it is. Hopefully they will get the servers kind of beefed up so they can deal with the strain that they're experiencing.
Right. So your thought process, right, is I'm going to try to get as much I'm going to try to get as much of this, like I'm going to participate in this game as much as possible, and WoOL kind of gives you additional boosters or ways to participate in this game to give you an advantage. So you're not only participating in the game, you're also playing and burning some of your WoOL in order to get a higher return.
Exactly. I deposited like 6,000 of my WoOL into the game last night so I could buy power-ups and that sort of thing. But have got pretty substantial. I told everybody to buy WoOL and Wolf Game assets when it was like sub half of a cent. And it's up over, I think it's about 3 cents now. So if you were watching on Twitter, you're probably up 8x. I've got some buddies who loaded like 6 million WoOL under a cent. So they're sitting really, really pretty. But yeah, my belief is that we'll burn a ton of WoOL. Emissions are not that bad. There's some documentation on Twitter. If you search for old Wolf Game stuff, you can see how much WoOL comes into the ecosystem every day. Team's been very transparent about all that. I expect the burn rate, especially once we see how much gold they get and get a little more clarity on how it works, and they beef up the server so that it doesn't lag super bad. We're going to see a bunch of gold. We'll see a ton of WoOL burned. Prices, I mean, WoOL touched, I think, 41 cents at all-time high in 21, and that was with not that many people playing on mainnet. So you get farmers just cranking out WoOL burning to go after gold. I think we're going to see things get kind of goofy.
It was, yeah, with Wolf Game, it was just like, yeah, I had 55 cents apparently. So with Wolf Game, it was, what was difficult for me about it on mainnet was the gas was a freaking nightmare.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, well, I'm curious to see how that plays out. I actually don't have any bWOOL exposure, but I might allocate some capital into it. It's certainly interesting. I want to switch topics a little bit. I want to talk fantasy top with you, ICO, because last time you came on the show, it was still very early on. We went through the cycle of basically everyone with a pulse that bought something was up incredibly. Everyone was tweeting out about how they were up. Look at my profits. This is the next. There's an L2 on Twitter. This is the best thing I've ever seen. And since then we've seen a pullback on it, and a lot of people rotate their capital out. You tweeted out yesterday after their lottery kind of a mishap that they actually then took back, that this is a death blow to an app that was already trending down. I'm going to take my ETH to a more transparent app. I don't know how much of that was engagement farming versus you being transparent and actually meaning it, but I've been pretty vocal about some of the mistakes the team has made, and it feels like some of them are going to be fixed in the next week. But I'm curious what you make of all things fantasy top right now.
Yeah, so I haven't sold any of my cards since any of those posts. A lot of that is engagement bait, but also like emotional feeling about how I perceive things that are going on. I think it was just such a dumb decision yesterday. It felt like they didn't talk to anybody that had a decent stake in the game before they rolled that out. And there've been a couple of decisions where they made that, and it's like I trust the team to build the product. And that's true with any NFT or any kind of project you buy into. Is you have to trust the team to be doing what they're doing with the product. It doesn't mean that I trust them understanding the market that they're dealing with. Because time and time again, since 2020 or so, you just see teams over and over again proving that they have no idea what the market they're engaging in wants. And here, you pissed off 99.9% of your players at the expense of giving, 0.1% of people some kind of nice bonus from this lottery that, like, yeah, the MP4 was kind of fun. It had like cool retro music. But like when I opened up Fantasy yesterday to check my rewards, it showed me my rewards before the animation. So I was like, wait, 3 gold and whatever. Started like, surely that's not right. And then it ran and it was still 3 gold and 500 fantasy points. I was like, I'm one of the top players on this thing. How in the world is that what I get out of this thing that you guys have hyped for 3 weeks and made us lock up our ETH to earn stars for? Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
So I think that it was the right call to roll back the stars. I think that they sold us a Lambo and they delivered a Prius as far as rewards go, which, again, it's a lot of people. I think, honestly, crypto Twitter are some of the dumbest people in the world. They were like, oh, this guy doesn't know how the lottery works. Oh, you got nothing. You got you got a consolation prize for a lottery. You should be happy. I'm like, guys, it's not about what happened here exactly. It's understanding your market. If it's a game premised on new inflows of capital and people wanting to continue to play, once people realize they're not getting great returns, everybody's cards are way down right now after a week. So then you release this wheel and say, oh, it's going to make everybody happy. There's going to be great prizes. And then most people get nothing or equivalently nothing. They're not going to be happy with that. It has nothing to do with, oh, be happy with your free consolation prize. It's all about, well, there were 40,000 accounts that quite literally haven't entered a tournament that all also got the same reward that most of the top players got. That's the problem.
Yeah. And so obviously the market hasn't been too kind to Fantasy Top recently. What's interesting is this kind of trend of you see these floor cards going up in value, which is interesting. But like once you go like there's a lot of like relatively active people that are basically worth zero, or not zero, but trending towards being like the bottom of the barrel. Yeah. It's a weird kind of state of the ecosystem right now. There's actually a lot of like people that I see performing well.
They're super cheap.
Last week, yeah, you see a lot of people that are like actually performing pretty well that are insanely cheap. Like they drop a banger, they get 100, 200, 300,000 impressions, but basically no one gives a shit. So I'm curious kind of how you're thinking about the ecosystem now. I am back from before I was just trading the cards. Now I'm actually interested in playing the game because just how much gold that they have. So I think they have relevancy at least for the next few weeks. But from a long-term perspective, I'm not nearly as excited about the platform as I was before.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I'm tempering my bullishness with kind of some realistic expectations. So right now they're giving out like 70% of their gold, which still they have a good bit to give. But you have to look at it from the framework that most of that is going to the top tier tournament. So main tournament, top league is going to get most of it, which honestly, that's fair. That's probably how it should be. I'm in the top tier league or whatever. So I'm hoping to continue to farm gold. And I hope that they get more gold in the next wave, because if they don't, I think it's going to get ugly pretty fast. If it wasn't already ugly. I think it's not a bad time to be playing at this point. If you, like you said, you can get some really cheap cards that are pretty solid, and you can make some decent decks just with a little bit of game theory and some strategy. So I think the ROI now is probably just about the same as it was like the first day it launched, when people didn't know what they were doing and they were buying a bunch of cards. I don't know if we'll see another bubble kind of thing where it goes to people get like 8, 10x on their portfolio, unless you get lucky and buy exactly the right cards. But I think the value is back at this point. And I think also they're having some kind of burn feature where you can burn some cards that are useless to get potentially a better one. What I'm curious about is much shorter competitions. So some sprints, like a 3-hour, a 6-hour contest, as opposed to these like week-long. Because I think that is really how you're going to kind of keep the attention economy. And maybe do like a 6-hour DFS style competition where you pay 0.1 ETH, you build a deck with a salary cap based on what their current scoring is, and you compete against people that way. So you don't have to own the cards necessarily, but you're still playing an ETH stakes game based on who you think is going to perform in like a 6 or 12-hour window. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff you can do there, but I think they've got to iterate game modes and get some fresh things out there, because as it stands currently, the people at the top are going to keep playing, so we've already got good decks, and it's not worth it at this point to liquidate out. And people that are just now coming in can put together cheap decks that can perform semi-well, but the rewards really aren't that great, but also there's not really a whole lot of risk for them.
Yeah, they're in a tough spot. I've always said that their biggest weakness is not necessarily from the product side, but more so on like the marketing side, like getting people actually excited. They fumbled the shit out of their season 2 hero launch.
Oh yeah.
And like
it was just bizarre messaging.
They fumbled some competition messaging. Like their messaging is not good, is what I've noticed. They did the same thing with this lottery. Is like, I didn't care for the lottery. What I cared for was like, don't hype something up if it's not going to be good. And another thing is, I think the willingness to admit that they made a mistake. Literally yesterday was the first time they basically admitted that they made a mistake. Other times they've like dunked on people that have tried to make a mistake and shared how much like daily active users that they had. Look, I don't mind that. It's the Twitter game, I think, as well. The other thing that's relevant, ICO, is yesterday was the lowest volume that Fantasy Top has recorded in ETH since day one. So ever. We saw the lowest amount yesterday. So I don't know. Are you still actively deploying? Are you just kind of holding and participating? How are you thinking about actually trading this?
I may snag one or two more deep value epic cards. If I see there's a couple that I've got my eyes on, and if I can get somebody to paper one to me, I'll probably grab one or two more just to kind of round out my main deck. Like I said, I'm in League 2. I think that the rewards, if you can place top 200 or so in the top league, are probably still worth it. I only have like 2.5 ETH exposure to this, and I've farmed over 1,000 gold already on it. So I'm pretty close to break even anyway, even without selling cards based on expected values of gold. So it's really not that big of a risk in my mind. Definitely down in unrealized profits from what the top was. But yeah, I have a hard time seeing a good reason to deploy a whole lot of new capital after yesterday's wheel rollout for the lottery, and based on just the other things that are coming. I'm going to probably put a lot of ETH into Wolf Game. If we're being totally honest, that seems like it's going to happen. I've been cooking on Cambria and Captain and Co. So if I have extra ETH to allocate there, maybe that's it. I might even just go play with a bunch of perp dexes and just go hard long on ETH, because people are expecting. I mean, the ETFs are all but accepted at this point, and I don't think anybody's really ready for how much volume is going to come from Wall Street.
Yeah, I mean, look, with the problem with Fantasy.top is I can talk about it all day, but yeah, I want to move on a little bit actually, and I want to talk Blast TGE. We're a month away until the Blast TGE, a little over. Tomorrow will be a month until
and a day.
We have ETH going on a 20% ripper, which was not good for anyone that had their ETH tied up in liquid NFTs or Fantasy.top cards. I think the ETH ETF is definitely incredibly bullish for the Blast TGE, but I mean, I'll throw it to you. Like, how are you thinking about 30 days going into this? You obviously have, I think, 11,000 gold now. You've done incredibly well with it so far. Are you going to take profits right away after this TGE? Are you going to try to participate in season 2? Are you going to stake your Blast if there is anything? Like, how are you kind of thinking about that going into it?
Yeah, so at a high level, I am expecting to move at least half of my airdrop into ETH. I think that may not be the highest ROI or highest expected value play at TG, but that's the one that makes the most sense for me. I think BCheque was right. Like, when you see a number that's big enough that it makes you want to sell, you should probably sell. I'm a third cycler at this point. It's a miracle that I am still liquid after not putting anything into crypto since 2017. But what you got to do is you got to be selling. If you don't sell, you never have more fresh fiat or fresh capital to deploy into something else. Right. And also, I mean, the like make it stack. If you have a Bitcoin and you got 100 ETH, 10 years from now, you're retired and never thinking about anything. So at that point, that's kind of what, if you're new into crypto, if that's what you're building for, and you like have a realistic timeline for being financially independent, that's what you're targeting. You get 3 or 4 validators running. Those are eventually going to run to $1 million a piece. You live on 3 to 4% APR on 4 of those, you're done. It's not that difficult to see the math happening that way, especially with the ETFs. So for me, it's going to be probably half to ETH, and then evaluate what to do with the other stack. And that's mostly going to depend on what kind of incentives Pacman deploys. We already know the playbook. Y'all talked about this earlier. Blur showed us exactly what's going to happen. He's the best Ponzi engineer of our generation, and he does it legally too, which is kind of cool, at least legally so far. Yeah. So we're not going to see SBF, we're not going to see Madoff. Pacman is the king of Ponzi's, but he does them in ways that are fun and that make people money. So I don't see any reason not to keep a little bit of exposure there, but definitely I'm going to take some into a safer feel for me, which is going to be ETH exposure.
How are you thinking about Pacmoon? They tease their V2. They have they saw a little bit of a pullback that's now being kind of gobbled up back up to almost 18 cents. You're calling that they go to an FDV, I'm assuming, of $1 billion. Let's assume that doesn't happen between now and the Blast TGE. There might be a little bit of a pullback on all things Blast assets post TGE, but how are you thinking about Pacmoon in particular?
Yeah, there might be a little bit of pullback. I mean, the reality with Pacmoon is it's free for me. I grinded season 2 back before anybody cared about Pacmoon. So anything I sell out of that turns out to be taxable on short-term gains, which sucks. So there's less incentive for me to sell it unless I really feel like it's at an unsustainable price. Every chain has one meme coin that really takes the spotlight and runs very hard. Even if it doesn't do it immediately, it does it eventually. And Blast isn't going away. So for me, Pacmoon is a long-term hold. I've worked with the team some behind the scenes on V2 and what they're rolling out, so I know what's coming. and feel very comfortable and confident with what their plan is. I've talked to the guys a lot, and they're actually super, super, super capable developers.
Yeah.
This isn't their first rodeo. They know what they're doing. So for me, Pacmoon's an easy hold. The long that I opened right when the show started after the jackpot, we're already up. So it's one of those things that I think people want Pacmoon. I was talking with Bobby the other day, and we were like, what other project has literal thousands of people dancing on the timeline to their own music for the coin just because they can? Like, yeah, they want the airdrop, they want the literal. Yeah. These people are dancing for $10, $20. People love Pacmoon. It's awesome. And so once you get a community like really developed around something because they like it, that is sticky. That's sticky. They're not here just for the money. I mean, yeah, some of them are, but like it's not just about the money. It's about being part of it. And I think what you're going to see with V2 is that continues to be the case, and maybe even turns into a bigger deal. People being here for the culture and the community. That's probably all I can say about it. You'll all find out in a few days. I think people like it.
I'm excited for it. I've been a long bullish on Pacmoon. I'm excited for everything they're doing. I initially faded it. Was calling it another Ponzi. Forget what I said exactly. I wasn't farming it. It was the same as Portal Coin.
Oh yeah.
I was talking a lot of smack about it, but thank God I changed my positioning on it. Before we wrap, ICO, it's is there anything else you find interesting about Blast right now? I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit worried about Blast, literally just because of the lack of participants in this market. That's the one thing where I'm like, man, there's just such little people that like Runes have their own little culture, base meme coins, Solana meme coins, NFTs, and then Blast is trying to capture this a little bit, and it captured this magic with Fantasy.top for about a week and a half. And we saw how fast and the lack of stickiness and loyalty that those people have. It's wild how fast those people will flip. But I don't know. I'm curious if there's anything else you find interesting about Blast that's worth covering today.
Yeah, so I think the real alpha for Blast, I think it's a fair position to be concerned about people bailing, things kind of fizzling out. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but I think it's a fair take. For me, the big thing is Wave 4 distribution. There's 2 more distros of gold. Projects are still moving to Blast. So we've only been live since into February, March 1st. So we're not even 3 months old as far as a mainnet chain. And that's like really, really, really young for a major chain. The TVL is still massive. I expect it to stay pretty much like that because what else is there to do right now? You go to mainnet, you pay a bunch of gas fees, and you buy NFTs that are down only because they got ruined by various different parties. I won't go into that. But like nobody wants to buy a mainnet NFT because all they do is go down. So what else are you going to do? Like maybe do some DeFi on L1, but most of the good DeFi protocols have moved to L2s because they're cheaper and you can do more. So it's one of those things where it's like, well, what else are people going to do? They're not going to sell their ETH. They're going to put it somewhere where they can use it but still get yield. So I think that's good. The big thing to watch is Wave 4 distribution. You've got Gangster Arena coming over. You've got Wolf Game that just bridged in. There's this one that I'm going to write about probably tomorrow or Monday called Blast Aqua. It's this like honestly kind of dinky little idle fishing game. But it's interesting. It's people trying stuff. And that's where you're going to find, I think, the gems for the next 2 waves is these new projects that haven't gotten gold before, but they've bridged over to Blast either natively because they haven't existed anywhere else or because they were on some other chain, some other L2, or they died on L1 mainnet years ago and decided they were going to try to have a resurgence. So those are the things that I'm looking at. And I mean, even just seeing how much hype Wolf Game's gotten over the last week, I think there's a lot of opportunity for those projects. And if you're a project founder that actually wants to bring a project back, there's no good argument for why you wouldn't be looking at bridging to Blast. Like Zedrun, they should have already been planning to move to Blast and revamp their horse racing. Like that should have happened a month and a half ago, unless they just don't care anymore, which is certainly possible. But that's I think what we're going to see is you're going to see projects that are excited about actually continuing to build stuff. They're not burned out or worn down by the bear market. They're going to come to Blast because you get native yield. You've got a target-rich environment. You've got a user acquisition budget totally subsidized by gold. Right. And Pacman has already shown that he wants to support that. So I agree with you. There's not much to do here yet. There's more to do here than there was a month ago. There's way more to do here than there was 2 months ago. We haven't had a North Korean hack in like 2.5 months. So that's
Baby
huge.
steps. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah, the skies are clear, greener pastures ahead. I think that's kind of the key is we're less than 3 months into this thing. So yeah, there's not much to do. There will be more viral apps, and probably ones that have more stickiness. I think we all kind of knew that Fantasy.top wouldn't go up forever. I don't think it's going to die, but I don't think it's going to go up forever. We probably won't see another bubble of the same proportion. But there are lots of different composable applications you can build on top of what they've gotten. And so I think there's, like I said, the daily DFS kind of things for various salary capped competitions. That sort of thing interests me. And I think you'll see different applications that grab people's attention.
The gold distribution aspect of it is so interesting. Like it is so unique to where all of a sudden, like companies can kind of bootstrap customer acquisition in a way that they couldn't before, right? Like,
oh yeah,
Fantasy.top wouldn't have been able to get the virality that they had if not for gold. And they wouldn't have had a shot. They wouldn't have had a shot. And all of a sudden, like, it's hard enough building in crypto, doing all these things. So like this gold distribution is so valuable for a lot of companies and teams. I'm not surprised that we've seen people bridge over. I'm surprised we haven't seen more within new projects. It sounds like is what you're looking for. Is it Gangster All-Star? I don't know if this is the right collection. You said they're bridging to Blast?
Yeah, so that maybe I misspoke. No, not those guys. I don't know what those are. That's
okay.
Here, let me. I'll send it in the little private chat real quick. Gangster Arena, actually.
Gangster Arena. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what Gangster All Stars are. They look like they're super G. Yeah, so Gangster Arena. It's by this group called Uncharted. It's a Web3 games company that kind of develops on-chain spectacles. They had this thing called Blast the Bomb that went through a testnet phase. Gangster Arena actually went, I think it was on base for season 1. It's a little idle game where you earn these greed tokens, and basically you're competing on a leaderboard to see who can have the best game strategy, game theory, and you win ETH prizes and greed. And so it's going live in a couple days. The testnet, I had posted about it a week or two ago. The testnet was kind of fun, kind of learning how the game works. Basically, you set up your gangsters and they go rob stuff while you're away. And then every 12 hours, you can select other people in the game to raid. And other people can raid you too. So you have to set up your gangsters either on offense or defense and kind of figure out who's going to be pushing after you based on the rewards you might get in different ways. At the end of the season, the ETH rewards that are funded by both the tax on the token and the mint of the original gangsters go to the top of the leaderboards. And so it's like an idle strategy PvP game. It wouldn't surprise me to see them get a decent chunk of gold. They've shipped a season already, and Pac-Man seems to like giving gold to real products. So I'm looking at that one. I think it'll be interesting. And kind of just keep my ear to the ground for other things that are either bridging over that have already had some success or things that are starting on Blast that can show they've already got a product. The same with PXU World. Their mint is tomorrow. It's for Pixel Racing Club, and I know they've got at least 20,000 gold. It was a super, super, super tight whitelist to get. But they've got a working game. I played the demo, and you'll get gold based on how you do on Pixel Racing Club. So that's another one I'm looking at.
Let's go. I mean, what I like about you, man, is you are not afraid to get your hands dirty. Like, the information's out there. What I've learned through trying to put more information and stuff out there is 95% of people or 90% of people are just not willing to put in the work. Like, straight up, they don't do shit. They just want to buy something and hope the price goes up. When it requires research or reading a white paper or playing something to test it, they straight up won't do it. They won't do it until it's way too late. And then when it's too late, they're blaming on you for being exit liquidity. I'm venting a little bit, but anyways, that's something that's
all very real. I think that's part of the success I've seen the last couple of weeks is really digestible step-by-step guides on how to do things. Because most people, like, humans should be able to read if they're on the internet, on Twitter. Most of us choose not to. They need their hands to be held. They don't want to read docs because the information is there. That's how, Cyrus is probably the best NFT trader and farmer of all time. That's how he wins. He reads everything and he knows what to do. I'm working on a much, much, much smaller bankroll. I can't move with size like he can on a bunch of things, but it's the same model that I've seen him use. He reads everything. He figures out how to maximize the return on it, and then he executes. And the information's all there. You just have to put in the work.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I appreciate real quick before we wrap. Any interest in Blastin Pepe? I've been seeing some people talking about. I think they gave a allow list to a bunch of people. I think Wasabi might be incubating them. Any information there that would be relevant for the listeners?
Yeah, so they're running their, I guess it's, I don't know if it's a marketing campaign or whatever. I don't expect them to make money on this themselves. Blastin Pepes, for what I can tell, is a 404. So like you saw Dune 404 on mainnet, you saw Asterix and a couple other 404 projects. It's basically like a semi-fungible NFT. And with Blastin Pepes, supposedly there's this floor lock where if you mint it, it's going to have the same kind of idea as Blaster NFTs, where you can immediately refund it by selling it back into the LP. So the cost is quite literally what you pay for it at the worst case scenario. So these probably should get all minted out because you can always dump it back in. And then from there, I don't know what these other features like farming and staking, I don't know what the point of those is yet. But if it's a no risk, like you're just putting your ETH in something, it's got enough attention, and the art's by Arsonic, which everybody knows and loves. And who doesn't love Pepes? I see Hyperlock on there too, which makes me think there may be some. Hyperlock's had some really sweet gold vaults over the last couple of weeks. So there may be a Blastin Pepes vault where you lock some WETH and some Blastin Pepe fractionalized tokens, and you earn gold. Like there's certainly possibilities that happens. So yeah, I'm looking at that one. I think I've got a couple of spots for it maybe.
It's a 404. So
yeah,
that's very interesting. I've been wanting one of these on Blast for quite some time now. So this is very interesting. I was waiting them. I didn't do my research. Blastin Pepes. I think I've allowed this from Pacmoon or something.
Yep. Yeah, Pacmoon should qualify. And I think it's worth having. I mean, we saw something similar to Blastopians when they first got wrapped on Wasabi. When liquidity increases on an asset because you wrap it and then fractionalize it, you're generally going to have more people able to buy it than if it was $700 on its own. People can buy a fraction of it and be like, oh, I'm part of this community now. That's functionally why 404s are interesting, is just because of the extra liquidity. We saw this with Flooring Labs with like micro pudgy tokens and all that kind of stuff. When you make it accessible, you make more liquidity available, and that's helpful. It also kind of ruins some of the eliteness of owning it. So I think you see some downward pressure too from that, because it's no longer like, oh, I have a whole one, I'm the only one that can be part of this. Ultimately, you're going to see, I think, the future of NFTs probably have a lot of fractionalization. Yeah. Just because I think that's what people want to trade. They want easy liquidity, and we're kind of tired of holding illiquid bags to zero. But yeah, I'm watching Blastin Pepes. I'll be minting however many I'm able to. It's a no-risk situation in my mind. Wasabi's been great. I've talked to them a good bit over the last little bit. They gave me a bunch of gold yesterday for, I'm not really sure why. Haven't even done that much volume on the platform, but we don't get mad about free 200 gold distributions.
Not bad at all. Not bad at all.
Beast,
man, it was a pleasure having you on. I would actually I'm going to DM you about possibly coming on every week, because I think you have a close ear on the pulse and what's going on more than anyone else in terms of actually being able to articulate it and share it with everyone else in a digestible way that is a rare thing to see on crypto. So I appreciate you coming on, man. Certainly a lot of value shared, and thanks for going over. I know we were supposed to only do 30 minutes. So I appreciate that.
It's been great. That's super appreciate you having me on. You already know this. I eat, sleep, and breathe this stuff. My wife's going to be pumped when June 26th gets here. She's a saint. Love her.
A month left. Let's go.
A month left. We're gonna lock in. We're gonna print as much as we can at TGE, and then we're gonna just have the blast. No pun intended of our life. But yeah, this is great. I'll catch you soon. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Beast. Have a good one. Make sure to follow him. Let me get it's at Beast ICO on Twitter. Absolutely crushing the content. Like very, very great follow. He is making his way up the charts on Twitter and on his own Blast Gold. So make sure to follow Beast at Beast_ICO. Hey, Beast, thanks so much. And you have a great weekend, man.
Same to you, Clemente. It's an honor.
Bye. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our show. Thank you all for tuning in for the 2 Pacmoon winner. Dude, I was about to give it to Mr. Yellow. When he brought up, give me the Pacmoon. Mr. Yellow, you're a G. You always are listening, supporting the show, supporting Bodagos. I'm going to give you the Pacmoon. Just DM me your ETH wallet on Twitter, and I'll send it over to you later today. I'm also going to give it to Tony on Twitter, who also was commenting. He retweeted the show. So congratulations to Tony and Mr. Yellow. You have just won the $100 in Pacmoon. Let's freaking go. Thank you guys for tuning in. Really, really appreciate you guys. Give me a follow on subscribe on YouTube. If you're listening, give us a like there. It'll help the algorithm so we can get this to more people. If you're on Twitter, follow us, follow Bodago's ENT, and we'll catch you guys next time. Thank you all for tuning in. See you Tuesday for the Daily Bone